Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I'm interviewing Jeff Granville. We met at a Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden event just recently, and I'm super excited to host him. Jeff is the founder and president of Mindful Presents, is a mindfulness practitioner, coherence counselor, spiritual advisor, and trauma specialist. He is endorsed by Bruce Lipton, Ph.D., and Bruce Cryer, former CEO of HeartMath. Jeff served for 4 years as a member of the Family Advisory Council at Seattle Children's Hospital, trained as a first responder in the parent support team. He served on the nurse training, anesthesiologist training, root cause analysis, and hospital-acquired condition panels, as well as consultant to the clinical efficiency department. Jeff is a fifth-generation inhabitant of San Juan Islands, so he's a local growing up on and around the waters of Pacific Northwest, and is a father of 8 and grandfather of 10 beautiful children. Wow. After his youngest son, Makoy, was diagnosed with a rare form of T-cell leukemia, Jeff became a mindfulness practitioner and formed the nonprofit Mindful Presents to bring the gift of mindfulness, coherence, and controlled breathing to pediatric patients, families, and care providers. Since then, Jeff has opened up his services to the general public and specializes in coherence, breathing, STIR, somatic trauma imprint release, and aspect reintegration. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Liz. It's an honor. And that was a mouthful, and you read it very well.
Thank you. That was a mouthful. It was a pleasure to read it. And I welcome you to the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation for sure today. So why don't you go ahead and tell our audience what led you to be doing the work that you are doing today?
Well, that's a very distinct event. My youngest son of 8 children, Makoy, was diagnosed with T-cell leukemia when he was 4. And the path that we went on, the journey we went on through Western medicine was amazing. From the initial, they were stuck in a position where they literally said, "We don't have anything to help your son. There's nothing we can do. We're chasing something we can't catch." Into, "Oh my gosh, we just witnessed a miracle. Let's try that again." And that led to 15 different do or die, life or death situations where becoming coherent in your body and getting the agitation in your autonomic nervous system down was the key. And, you know, all ancient cultures with breath work and meditation and different belief systems all have some way to reset the autonomic nervous system and to feel open and connected with the group and divinity versus closed off and isolated. So that's really what led me into what I've been doing now. And since his final do or die situation was an 8-hour kidney transplant, which he was able to get through without an epidural and 0 pain meds on recovery. And he was out of the hospital in 9 days. He was literally walking and running down the hall on the 3rd day after transplant. And he had 0 pain meds, not a Tylenol, not an aspirin, nothing. And especially absent were opiates, because most people have to take opiates for weeks after a transplant or some major surgery like that, or, you know, it can affect them the rest of their lives. So anyway, we literally received miracles. We received downloads, because this is not what I did. This is not what I'm educated in. This is not my career. This is something where I was literally just plucked from one place in my life and put it another. And that's where I've been for the last 10 years. So I have literally been researching the science behind the miracles that we encountered, that we were blessed with, that we manifested. Those miracles were explainable with the research that is out there on quantum physics and consciousness and our belief system and HeartMath's heart coherence. So every little research I did, and literally I was laying in the hospital bed with my son on one side and my iPhone in the other saying, what did we just do? What just happened? How did we do that? And the first search led me to Nassim Haramein, a quantum physicist. And it was during one of the first procedures, he had to have an unsedated lumbar puncture. They had to pull spinal fluid out of his spine, which is protected, the vertebrae, by the most sensitive nerves in the body. And the plan is, they tell you that you got to sign papers. We're going to put your son in a fetal position, and four of us doctors are going to hold him down while another doctor sticks the needle through his open vertebrae as we put him in the fetal position. And we're going to have to draw spinal fluid, but we're stuck because we can't sedate him or he'll collapse and die. So a nurse witnessed me help him breathe through some situations, and they got me in the procedure room, and I was able to guide him down the river we had floated and the snow slopes that we'd skied for the last couple of years when he was only 2 and 3. So what I found out later is I was able to get him into a theta state, a mind out of body state where he could hear my voice and he was skipping in and out of sleep. And they were able to do a lumbar puncture and he didn't bat an eye. And every doctor in the room was in tears. There's 40 doctors ready to pounce on him in case he crashed. And they were able to get 3 vials of spinal fluid without him batting an eye. And they're like, that's the most spectacular thing we've ever seen. If we could teach everybody to do this, so they really, from that very first incident, encouraged me to do something with this. And I was still on the journey with him, though, we didn't know that first incident. They were able to treat him with chemotherapy once they pulled the spinal fluid and they checked the spinal fluid for new leukemic blasts. If it passed the blood barrier or not, they could treat him. But they literally had a law, a rule in the hospital, in the AMA, that if you can't test the spinal fluid, you can't administer chemotherapy. They'll die. They'll let them die before they won't cross that. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
But so they were able to pull the spinal fluid and then give him chemotherapy, and he recovered right away. But he had so many deep tumors in him that during that procedure, it was like his heart was beating inside 100 rubber bands, and his airway was down to the size of a pencil lead. And his superior vein had been blocked with tumors, so blood could go to his head but not return to his heart. So his eyes were swollen shut. So for a 4-year-old, that's like an alien autopsy. Your eyes are swollen shut. You can't lay on your back or your heart will stop. The fluid and the pressure from the tumors would stop his heart if he laid on his back. So he had to go through this all on his side with his eyes closed. And I just went forehead to forehead with him and started talking him down our ski slopes and telling him exactly what we were going to do with the needle, and nobody surprise him. And the key thing too is I told the 4 doctors that were going to hold him down. I said, you can lay hands on him, but don't restrict him. We're going to not surprise him. If you hold somebody back, that's the surest way to start a fight and tension in the body. And because they just laid hands on him, and I asked them to all match my breathing, because I was breathing and Makoy was following my breathing, which I didn't even know at the time, and trained our autonomic nervous systems and our heart rate and the coherence of the whole room. And
Wow.
yeah, it was. So when they said, I got 3 vials, everybody in the room went like that. And I said, did you hear that, Makoy? They got it. And he went, his eyes are swollen shut. He's 4 years old. And he's like, like that. And everybody laughed. They're like tears in their eyes, laughing, the whole room. It was like miraculous. But the whole time I felt like we were the calm at the eye of the storm. Like everything was in slow motion. And I learned later that's called tachypsychia. It's the psychic timing of an event. And if you're in a near-death situation, you record more frames a minute So when you look back on it, it seems like it was in slow motion. That's how
Wow.
like Michael Jordan gets in the zone and passes between someone's legs. And it's like they're standing still. You know, you're in that zone of flow. And literally, after they administered the chemotherapy and his swelling went down and he was able to eat and everything was calm and everybody left the room. And, you know, it's later that night. And I'm like, eye of the storm. We were like the eye of the storm. So I was searching it and I found Nassim Haramein was in Barcelona on stage saying any meteorologist can tell you the velocity of the wind. I want to know the math of the eye. I want to know the math of the singularity at the calm of the eye of the storm. And so that's what this became for me is that if you can biohack your way into that calm in the eye of the storm, the singularity within your heart and soul, like coherence is when you are in the singularity and radiating out from there to infinity in, to infinity out, right? And when you can get in that singularity, time stands still. And when you think about it, that's the only time ever that you can do anything about anything is right there in that moment. You take action in that moment or it passes you by, right? But if you are being held down for this procedure and things aren't going well, and you just keep going on that trajectory, you know the outcome. You're going to die. That would have ended badly, right? But if you can get to zero, if you can get to that calm, that singularity at the eye of the storm and become completely coherent, heart and soul, and you're in that moment, then you're in the eye of the needle. You're looking through the singularity and you can pick a new outcome. You can change your trajectory because you can respond to things instead of react. In Chinese, it's called Mu Shen, of no mind. You have all your faculties available, yet no prejudgment, no human windings. And many, many ancient cultures teach that, is to just show up and be present, right? And then you are that singularity and you can. That's where people who help people heal receive the information of healing for the person who's stuck and blocked and what's called body armored from healing. So that's where this has led me from. But everything comes out of being able to biohack your way into that singularity, into that coherent state. And I call it a sanctuary state. It's a place where you build a sanctuary. And the more often you go there, the longer you stay, the more it takes to get you out of it. Like I say, build that sanctuary. Like meditation is great. You know, if you can meditate an hour every morning to cure the ills of the other 23, that's great. But if you can get to a state of receivership where there's a gap, I call it the space for grace. The to be able to be graceful in the world is that space of response versus reaction, right? And just that little tipping point is the difference between health and illness. Fight or flight, rest and digest. It's like this or that every moment of your life. So what I tell people is if you can give 30 minutes a day to your wellness, practice my breathing exercises for 3 minutes, 10 times a day, and pretty soon you'll be in that state all the time. It's called the ratio of awareness. You'll flip the ratio of awareness and all of a sudden you'll become calm and be coherent.
Jeff,
So
that's incredible. What an incredible story. And what a life path that experience put you on. I heard in a previous interview that you did, I believe it was a year ago, someone in the facility said that they heard that the doctors in that room and the people in that room, that it was experience changing for them.
yeah, yeah. And you know what? I didn't know that until a couple years after. But there is a brilliant doctor, Eileen Ruhoy, who was a neurologist faculty at Seattle Children's Hospital during that time. She was in the lunchroom when that happened in the hospital. And without knowing that, I had the kids were going to karate as part of therapy. And right across the street was a Center for Healing Neurology. And I thought, well, I wonder what's going on there. And I walk in there and get a brochure, and it's run by Eileen Ruhoy. So I didn't know who she was. I didn't know she'd heard the story. But all of a sudden, I'm sending her a message, and she's like, Jeff Granville, that's the guy I heard about in the cafeteria. So we met several times, and she became the medical director of my nonprofit. And she's been there as a reference for this the whole time. And she really got me to focus on the paradigm shifting things that we did. We don't just reduce pain meds, we reduce the need for them. Like, I would have let my son press the morphine button if he had to, but he was not in pain, right? So you don't focus on reducing the pain meds, you focus on being coherent, and the pain won't come.
Wow.
So that pain reduction was one thing. And then what we did with anesthesia, there's a technique that I developed or received as the download in the moment of need to get him under anesthesia with just what they called a whiff of anesthesia. And we've proven that he doesn't go down into coma. He stays up in theta for the entire 8-hour operation. So what that means is that there is no shadow. Like, when you go under anesthesia, they say, okay, count down from 100, right? And you get to 97 and you're gone. But when you wake up, there's a shadow over that time, and you don't remember it for quite a while. Like, the anesthesia has to wear off. I mean, literally, they don't know how anesthesia works. The newest, latest is that the microtubules in the cells are affected by the anesthesia, but they still don't know how and why it, works different for different people. But anyway, so what we're able to do is get the body so calm. He's in such a coherent state with our breath work that just a little bit of anesthesia puts him under. And we developed, and this just came to me, I swear. It was like, I don't know where I heard about it. It was a gift from somewhere. I'll take it. I'll take divinity as a gift. But when we were breathing forehead to forehead, right, we were all calm. We're all doing it in the room. Right before they gave him the anesthesia to put him under, I would give him a word, and he wouldn't know what the word was going to be, but it's a word he would recognize, like Star Wars or something. I would pick some random word, and we'd be doing our breathing, and I would go 3, 2, 1, and then I would say the word, and on the word, the anesthesiologist would turn on the anesthesia, and he would literally take that word into his conscious mind, into his induction for surgery. And as soon as he woke up from surgery, he could recite the word. There was no shadow. Before he even had the breathing tube out, he was trying to say the word. And 15 major operations, but he went under for back pokes. He's been under, 50, 60 times he's been under anesthesia. And every single time he gets a whiff, it holds him under. And when he wakes up, he can recite the word. So every single nurse at bedside and anesthesiologist is just like, what did you just do? How, So as you read, I worked on the Family Advisory Council, and one of the things I did is I was able to talk to every new anesthesiologist that worked at Seattle Children's Hospital and every new nurse. There'd be 100 nurses in a room, and we would give presentations about who we are and what our story was and what it really meant to have a good nurse at bedside. And I have two daughters, my older daughters, that are nurses, and one's a midwife, and a third one is a clinical hypnotherapist and a death doula. So we have, we've got this, I say with my one daughter, she's a midwife, and the other's a death doula, and we take care of them in the middle. So coming in and going out and everything in between, right? So anyway, so it's a good spot to pause.
It's amazing.
I'll take a breath.
Amazing. And the word coherence keeps coming up as you're talking, Jeff. So, and you went to Coherence at that very first surgery that had to happen to remove the spinal fluid, which is still amazing. So let's jump into what that coherence does, what it does with the body, a little bit of HeartMath Institute, um, and just bring us into what that means for us. Like, how can
Yeah.
we use that in our life to find that still point?
Yeah, it is probably the biggest drill down of any conversation on any podcast, on any health issue. Coherence is now totally common buzzword, but back 10 years ago when I heard it first, it was only through HeartMath. And we've all grown up, like if you speak coherently or incoherently, right? People can understand you or they can't, right? And in quantum physics, coherence is frequencies that are the same, right? And if they're incoherent, one is bigger and it knocks the other one down, or vice versa. But if they're coherent frequencies, they actually build on each other. It's called a constructive frequency, but it's also destructive because that's what happens when an opera singer matches the crystal glass frequency and it shatters, right? It breaks apart. And this is a critical point for the trauma release we'll talk about later. But the matching frequencies, being coherent, okay? Now, HeartMath uses the word coherence when they talk about your heart and your mind being coherent together. So when we all know what it's like to do a list of chores that our heart's just not in it and it takes forever or like when you're in school and you're not interested and the second hand is just ticking, that's tachypsychia when it's actually really slow, right? So um, when your heart is in it, if you sing, if you do art, if you walk if you do nature, whatever you do, then your creative side and your right brain of it's your connection to divinity and the connection to others. The right parietal junction is our boundary and our sense of connection with other people. And that's how we co-regulate when we take care of somebody or when we co-regulate a baby in the womb. And then later we co-regulate. So you match their frequency, right? And then you become coherent with that person. So when HeartMath really zeroes down on the science, what happens is like you will find out that you have everybody heard like I have an average heart rate of 80 beats a minute or 90 beats a minute, whatever, high or low. That's really all you know. It's 70 is low, 60s are great, 90s a little high, and then blood pressure is important. We all hear that, right? But what's really important is not just the number of beats, but the distance between the beats, right? It's the information in between, just like life. It's like everything in between has all the information. It's the pause that has all the information. It's the gap. It's the rest that builds resiliency, not the wind sprint. It's the rest in between. Okay, so the information between the heartbeats is called heart rate variance. So as we breathe in, we breathe in, we trigger the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and our heartbeat speeds up. And when we exhale, oral preferably, our heartbeat slows down and we trigger the parasympathetic nervous system of rest and digest, and our heartbeat slows down. So over time, if you breathe a certain rate, your heartbeat will speed up and slow down over time. And that's called heart rate variance. How much it varies is a measure of health. And if it's stuck and agitated and fearful, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be all like spikes and up and down and irregular, incoherent. But when it's a coherent frequency, like you calm the heart with the breath, and I've got the breathing exercises that do this, like in lineal order, you count seconds with your breath, and then the heart will follow. And then you go to your wrist to feel your heartbeat, and you count heartbeats, and you breathe 5 heartbeats in the nose and 6 heartbeats out the mouth. And you'll notice that your heartbeat speeds up when you breathe in and slows down when you breathe out. That's the autonomic nervous system vacillating between fight or flight and rest and digest, right? That's called the autonomic swing. And that is the biophysiological explanation of coherence. You are in a coherent state. So the simple fact is most people in the world, mainly Western world, breathe an average of 20 to 24 repetitions per minute. That's like a second in and a second out, or second and a half in or second and a half out. The ultimate power for the cardiovascular system is 6 cycles a minute. So if you divided that, it would be 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, would be 60 seconds, right? Okay, with 6 cycles, 10 seconds a cycle, 6 cycles in a minute. That would be a target, right? But it's proven that if you take a sharp nasal inhale, you trigger the sympathetic nervous system higher. And if you oral exhale longer than the inhale, then you stretch that lower end and you get more heart rate variance. You become more coherent, deeper in your coherence. So there's 3 breathing exercises that lead you to the coherence breathing. That's the third one. And if you can, this is like if I'm in an elevator, which this literally happened, there was this administrator. She was standing there with her clipboard, and she was in charge of the heart transplant kids at Seattle Children's Hospital. That's
Mm.
what her job was. And I said, "Oh, wow, this is what I do. I'd love to talk to you." She goes, "Well, we're in an elevator. What can you give me in 2 minutes, right?" And I said, "Can you find your pulse?" And she had to struggle. She got it, finally got it, because she was working and anxious and in a hurry, and she couldn't really find her heartbeat, right? She's in her mind, she's not in her body. So I got her in her body and she was able to find her heartbeat. And I said, "Now breathe in your nose for 5 heartbeats and breathe out your mouth for 6 heartbeats. And after a few cycles, you'll notice that when you breathe in your nose, your heartbeat speeds up. And when you breathe out your mouth, your heartbeat slows down. So you're getting that heart rate variance, you're stretching it out. And if you do it for 5 seconds in and 6 seconds out, it's about 6 cycles a minute. So this coherence breathing that I'm showing you is literally the world's simplest way to biohack coherence in your body. And if you're already anxious, like you get wound up on something that somebody cut in front of you and you wanted that spot and you missed the light and you see them, you're just like, ugh, right? There's what's called the reset breathing. And that's when you're already triggered and you caught yourself, dang, I lost my sanctuary space because of that person, right? And of course, anger is the punishment we give ourselves for someone else's mistake, right? Our perception of their mistake, because
Mhm.
it's our blood chemistry that holds the anger and a grudge, not theirs. They don't even know we're mad, right? Unless they've seen
That's
us.
great.
But so the point is that if you are in your sanctuary space and you get interrupted, then you do what's called the reset breathing. And I'll add all these slides free in the links. You can provide them to people for free, and they're on my website with videos, instructional videos and stuff, no charge.
Awesome.
But so the reset breathing is 4 seconds, a sharp, the strongest, hardest nasal inhale you can handle. And some people can only handle one nostril, like they're really triggered and they can't breathe in their nose. They just get like, so whatever level you're at, we can start somewhere, right? So, like with us right here, if you take a sharp nasal inhale for 4 seconds with all the air you can take, and then you do a 8 second, really long, 4 seconds in, 8 second out with a O. Now the O, the vocal cords vibrate the vagal nerves and release serotonin into the body. And the one I did with Makoy was an awe. It was the controlled breathing. Like once you do the reset, 4 seconds in and 8 seconds out once, you just do that once. Then you go to controlled breathing where you count seconds. Breathe in for 5 seconds in your nose, breathe out for 6 seconds out of your mouth. In for 5 seconds in your nose, out for 6 seconds. Then your heart's going to follow, your veins are going to relax, your sensitivity and your finger conductivity is going to increase, and you're going to be able to feel your pulse. For people who couldn't feel their pulse before, these 2 breathing exercises will bring them to a physiology of being able to feel their pulse. I've had people find their pulse the first time when in 22 years, nobody's been able to find a pulse in her body without a stethoscope,
Yeah.
right? Doctor, nurse, whatever. So you go through the reset, then you do the controlled breathing where your heart follows along, and then you go to your heart and you've gone from a triggered state to a controlled state. You reset, control, and then you're coherent again, and you're back in your sanctuary space. And then you have a little gap, that little space for grace, a little space to be gracious between you and a reaction, right? Because our goal is to
Yes.
respond. We want to be Mushin, and we want to have all our faculties with us, and we want to respond instead of react.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And especially these days. So I'm glad that that's top of mind these days and in a lot of conversations. I heard you say reaching a state of reaching a state of coherent state of receivership. Let me see if I can say that again. Reaching a state of receivership in coherence.
Receivership.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So when we get to our sanctuary space, when we create coherence in our mind and body, in our breath work, and we're in that sanctuary space, we are open with the right brain. If we are triggered in fight or flight and we're incoherent, we're going to be left brain dominant. All the blood flow and energy between our two brains will go to the left brain to fuel the pattern recognition of fight or flight to survive. Okay, we'll be left brain dominant and we'll be only focused on the problem and we won't be open to the solution. Okay, so being what's called laterally integrated, where you're as open to the solution as you are focused on the problem, then you have equal blood flow between your left brain and your right brain. And then you can receive the downloads that I've been talking about through this medical journey that I would receive from my son in the moment of need by being coherent and say, I had no ego. It's like I have nothing to offer. I don't know what to do for my son. And right when I got the diagnosis and he struggled for a breath and I fell to my knees and I realized God had given me everything I needed to help him the most was just to be there and be present and don't let anybody hold him down or scare him or force him. That I can control that. I can do that for him, right? So the only thing I could do was exactly what he needed. And once I realized that and stayed in that neutral state, then I was receiving these downloads. And that's what I call a state of receivership. And this is a biohackable, this is like we can biohack our way into our sanctuary space. And once we're in our sanctuary space, we're in a state of receivership. We are open. And this is the state of being where every poem is written, every song is jotted down on a napkin, every invention is found in nature, and every math equation found in the cosmos is in this moment of receivership. Every invention, Nikola Tesla, over 600 inventions, they all came to him in a vision, fully manifested in a vision, detailed vision. They came to him, and he was coherent. He was Mushin. He was of no mind. He knew it was a natural law of nature. And if he was just focused on the problem and open to the solution, he would get the download of the invention of what to do, right? And that is why when humanity, because this is not just personal, like there can be individual coherence in my body, and then we can create mutual coherence when you co-regulate with someone like I did my son. And everybody I work with here at my clinic, everybody I visit with, I co-regulate with them. I match their breathing and I become coherent with them in the autonomic swing. And we can release trauma from that point. Because once your system, your heart will feel listened to when you're biophysically validating coherence, you're paying attention to your heart. And once your heart feels listened to and you become coherent, it says, hey, I must be in a safe place. All these traumas I've been holding, I don't need to hold them anymore. We're in a safe place now. We're co regulating with this other human where they become an emergent total greater than the sum of the parts. Like the toroidal field of the heart joins together, becomes coherent, and now you're a greater than the sum of your parts. And then the download of healing can come through the care provider into the care recipient who's blocked. They literally call it body armoring from consciousness. Your new
Yeah.
update. That's how we hold trauma in our soma. So that leads into, so really what I love to specialize in is this awareness, this prevention of trauma in the front end. Like there's never been a truer point where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? In this environment, when you're going for medical or you're going for something major in your life or death, whatever, do or die, um, to be in this coherent state is the most important thing you can do, is to get into this coherent state and not just react. The power comes from the pause, right? It's that gap in between. So the big lesson here is that with awareness, we can become coherent before we respond. We can stay in that state of coherence all day long. And that's a sanctuary space and what I call the state of receivership for the information from divinity and Mother Earth. Like if you're walking through nature barefoot and you have something on your mind, have you ever found resolution in nature? Everybody
Yes.
does, right? You get into a right brain state of connection. And when you promote blood flow to the right brain, it naturally inhibits the blood flow into the left brain through the corpus callosum, 40 million fibers that are inhibitory. So if you, that's why the truth of what you resist persists. Like if you're trying to meditate and you're trying to resist the thoughts, you're actually feeding them energy, right? You're using more left brain trying to hold them out, like where your keys are, and you got to get a cup of sugar and your shopping list and whatever, blah, 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 bombarding. But if you just naturally open to some guided meditation or music or sing or dance, like move your body to integrate the energy so that you're using your right brain. And as you use your right brain, it naturally inhibits the blood flow to the left brain, and that looping chatter will diminish. And by the way, the number one symptomology of all mental illness, anxiety disorders, stress disorders, autoimmune diseases, suicidal thoughts, depression, every one of them, the number one symptomology is looping thoughts.
Yep.
Looping thoughts. Like it's the common symptom from every single one of those challenges, right? So there's actually an enzyme created, it's called monoamine oxidase, and it's created in the MOA gene, and it actually goes and eats, dissolves the neurotransmitter between neural synapses, thoughts, right? When you have a looping thought, it's a connective thought, and you'll be on that to survive. Like it's for survival. You want to have looping thoughts if you're keeping the fire going at the mouth of the cave for the wolves. You want to have looping thoughts, but it's when your time to sleep, you want to go to rest and digest, and that enzyme comes up and it actually eats the neurotransmitter that makes that looping thought. Well, when we go, guess what? Guess what inhibits the production of monoamine oxidase? Trauma and being in fight or flight. You don't produce it, just like you don't produce telomerase to protect your telomeres, and your chromosomes diminish and you age. So we are in a state of well-being. Our natural state of being is well, right? It's only if something inhibits it that makes us out of in dis-ease. We're out of ease.
Wow.
So all of this comes down. The coherent breathing and the trauma release immediately stops the looping thoughts. And the number one symptomology is gone. So there's another tool of transcendence that that I wanted to talk about. The new one I'm using is Aura, right? So everything, some of what you just heard is new. Like I'm saying some new information. So now there's a new awareness, right? Because with aura, we all know that there's an electromagnetic field of the body and we see it. We're able, some better than others, but that's your energy field. And when you're grounded and open-hearted and you're open, you've got a big aura. You're filling the room, right? Okay, but when you're trauma and triggered and shamed, you're diminished and your toroidal field shrinks. When you're incoherent, your toroidal field is small. When you're coherent and open, your toroidal field is huge, right? So if you get into that triggered state, you are not open for health and well-being. All the life support systems in your body shut off because you're in fight or flight. You don't need to heal a scar when you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, right? So it's an on or off thing. So when back to the enzyme that eats the looping thoughts, if we create coherence in our body, that enzyme is produced. If we release traumas that are held to remind us to be careful, those enzymes are created. Telomerase is created, DHEA is created by the adrenal glands, produce DHEA, a molecule that's the health and well-being, it's the growth and protection, it's the wonderful, all healing fountain of youth, right? DHEA. But if you're triggered into fight or flight, your adrenal glands shut off and they produce adrenaline and cortisol to survive. And they don't flip back over until you're in rest and digest. So that's like an event. That's like run to safety and now I'm okay. Like the antelope outruns the lion one time and it gets done and it just shakes and it's reset and eating. We don't do that. We don't have that. We actually do. I did that with Makoy and it really helped. But we tend to store and think and ruminate like we don't want to get chased by that tiger again and we better watch out and blah, 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 over and over and over. And it becomes chronic and then we diminish. We don't have open insight senses like intuition. Like I've even worked with a group of bereaved parents from Seattle Children's Hospital who wanted to communicate with their children after they passed. But they were so angry at God and so angry at the doctors that they were all left brain and they weren't laterally integrated. They weren't in that state of coherence and lateral integration. And once we breathe into coherence and be as open to the solution as we are to the problem, then we can get the information. We open to that state of receivership. So this is what I was talking about with the aura, is that with this awareness, you now have a new understanding. So we can take a reset and make an adjustment. So aura is also an acronym for awareness, understanding, reset, and adjustment. And if you think about it, this is the mechanism that we do everything. Like I'm leaving the house and I open the door and I see it's raining. That's a new awareness. I have an understanding I'm going to get wet. So I have to reset and go back and change or get a coat. I make an adjustment because of a new awareness. We do that with everything, whether we think about it or not. So when we're stuck, if we know that an insight is a number one way to get out of feeling stuck, to have a breakthrough in your mental health and your physical health, is to have an insight. And what is an insight? But a new awareness with a new understanding. And then you make a reset. And like we talked about, the most important thing is putting things into action, integrating them into your life. So you have to make an adjustment in the way you show up in the world, right? If we want to apply the aura to chronic anxiety, if we have an awareness of what it's doing to us and we understand that, and we want to take a minute to reset and make an adjustment, we can change our outcome, right? And then once we have that experience and we put that new awareness to the problem next time, then we have that spiral of ascension. If the child is held down for a shot, do you think it's going to be easier next time or harder? It's going to be harder.
Harder.
So if I can teach them how to practice and rehearse and dissipate the charge, count down 3, 2, 1, go. Do you want to know what the biggest, most important thing about giving a shot to a kid or anybody is? The needle should go in on the exhale.
Hmm.
If you're being held down and somebody forces the needle into you, what are you going to do?
Yeah, breathe in.
That emotionally binds it into your emotional memory, into your soma every time. And you're being held down at the time when you go, okay. So what we do is we do our coherence breathing, 5 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And then we go, we're going to, like every shot Makoy gets, it's like 3, 2, 1, go on, go. So we breathe in, 3, 2, 1, go. We literally emphasize the go, and the vocal cords vibrate the vagal nerves, release serotonin. It calms the nerves. It's not as painful. You've put in the needle on the exhale, which is a sympathetic trauma, a trauma spot, but you're exhaling a parasympathetic physiology at the time. And you've rehearsed it, so you've dissipated the charge. Kids have success every single time they add this practice. And it is, they're trying to transcend a life situation of, think of the fear. If I have to go for that vaccine, they're going to hold me down because I'm afraid. That's what they did last time. They come to me, we sit in here, we practice it, we learn what coherence is, and we use this new awareness to have a new understanding. We practice and we make a reset and we make an adjustment in how we do it, and we have success. Then we apply that success to the next lap, the next spiral. Then you're in a spiral of ascension instead of descension.
Nice. I love that. And I love the exhale too. My chiropractor, whenever I'm getting adjusted at each adjustment, there's an inhale and an exhale, and she adjusts on the exhale. I want to wrap this
Yeah.
into the somatic trauma input release because it applies here too on finding that point of coherence to release the trauma. And I want you to go into it because you have a great way that we don't have to spend all of this time on our trauma in talk therapy when we do this practice. So explain a little bit that practice and what it enables us to do.
Yeah, thank you. It again, this was a gift because um, at the time I developed this, McCoy had been in the hospital for quite a while. He had a catheter, an H.D. catheter in his left chest to do dialysis, and he had a catheter, a Hickman, in his right chest that went to his heart so they could draw blood or give meds. So here's a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old. For 3 years, he had these two tubes coming out of him. And you'd have to change the dressing on them like every week. And they would literally hold kids down and rip them off, clean it, and put new ones on while they were on dialysis with tubes hanging out with their blood circulating. So I said, no, nobody's ever doing that to my son. I became certified with the home clinic to do them myself, all of his dressing changes, so we could take him out of the dialysis environment and put him in a home environment where he could be calm.
Nice.
We could have a new outcome, right? If we, like Tim Leary and Ram Dass, the experience or the set and setting determine the experience, and the experience determines the outcome. That
Mm-hmm.
applies to this and everything, right? So if I can create a new experience, a new set and setting, I can give him a new experience, and we can change the outcome to success. So that's what we did. And I would do every dressing change, and we would breathe to a state of coherence. His skin conductivity stayed good so that the adhesive remover would work. Like if you put on a new dressing, you clean it all up and you put on a new dressing, when the child is in fight or flight and the skin conductivity is low and they kind of have beads of sweat, the sticker, the Tegaderm never sticks and they get infections. And I'm on the root cause analysis group at the hospital, and I'm telling them we use the same HD catheter for 27 months. And we didn't have a single surface infection. The only infection he got was inside the tube, and that's from them doing dialysis. And that's unheard of. That's just unheard of. The longest they'd ever gone was like 7 months without having to, they got to take it out and put a new spot in, let that part heal. So kids will be riddled. And then once they do that enough, then they have to do the fistulas, which go right into the wrist. And
Ouch.
that's like nightmare. I could go, I have a story about a young lady that I met that is a whole half-hour detour, but it is heartbreaking of
Mm.
what happens in a hospital to kids. Okay.
Wow.
So here we are. We're showing them that by being coherent, we can now keep these and make them last. So stir. This is what led to stir. One night, he had to have orthoscopic surgery between his ribs. 3 prongs went in. One was a camera, one was a light, and one was a pair of scissors. And he'd been building fluid in his pericardial sac, the sac around his heart, that should have about a teaspoon of fluid to lubricate the heart. And because he had so many tumors around his heart, it was bringing fluid, like stem cells to the and plasma to the wound site to heal it. Like you do, you get a surface, like a scratch, it'll turn clear first and then make the scab and all that. So that was happening inside his pericardial sac. Fluid was building so high, it was creating pressure on his heart, and they were worried about what's called tamponade, which is hydraulic pressure on the heart that shuts the heart down and they die. Okay. So they had to drain the fluid from his pericardial sac twice. And each of those were a miraculous, groundbreaking, oh my God story with minimal anesthesia. And they literally make you sign that, okay, we're going to give them anesthesia. They're going to relax and die. We're going to stick a needle, big syringe needle through their sternum into their pericardial sac and pull the fluid out. And then we fib them back to life. Here, you need to sign for that. That's
Yeah.
twice they did that, right? They expected to get 80 milliliters of fluid out. The first time they got 240 milliliters. The second time they thought they had about 80 milliliters, they had 420 milliliters. Like that's a full glass
Wow.
of
Yeah.
fluid around his heart. But yet he was so coherent, he didn't have any signs of tamponade. And they gave him a whiff of anesthesia and he never died. They didn't have to fib him back. So there's two miraculous stories told very, very short. Okay,
That's
but the
incredible.
third time they were building, they said, listen, we can't keep doing this. We're going to cut a 2-inch hole in his pericardial sac. So when the fluid builds, it'll just drain into his chest cavity. And I'm like, you're going to do what to my son? This is your answer, is that you're just going to cut a 2-inch hole in the pericardial sac. So here I have, they had the camera and the light and the scissors. I have the photos of them inside my son's chest cavity cutting the hole in his pericardial sac. So they removed the orthoscopic surgery, the tools. They stitched each of the 3 incisions, but one of them, they put a tube in it with a vacuum ball. So if any fluid builds, it'll suck it out, right? And then they stick a Tegaderm on it under his arm, and he wakes up from anesthesia. And luckily, he had just had a whiff and he was barely under. So it didn't store, like when your conscious mind is under anesthesia, your autonomic consciousness records everything, every sound, everything they say, and it stores it in the wound site so that you're reminded of it when somebody approaches it. You guard it because you're holding the trauma that you were unconsciously holding, right? So
Interesting.
that's what a STIR is. STIR is an acronym for somatic trauma imprint release. Okay. A somatic trauma imprint is an emotional snapshot from the level of consciousness that endured the trauma. So it's like a recipe. When I was 6, I got chased by my drunk dad and I had to hide in the closet until I couldn't hear any more voices. Okay. Just say that's a traumatic event somebody went through. And you're storing that as a 6-year-old. So later in life, when somebody's talking angrily when drinking, it tickles that trauma, and you're reminded like you are now a 6-year-old reacting like a 6-year-old because it's an emotional snapshot taken from the consciousness that endured the trauma. And it's held in the soma. The fascia of the soma holds the piezoelectric charge of the trauma. And the fascia, if you're familiar with it, is like a spider web through the whole body. It goes from the feet all the way through the crown. Every cell in the body has like a dozen strands of fascia through the nucleus of every cell in the body. It is an amazing spider web that connects, like you twinge it here, it vibrates here. And a somatic trauma imprint is like somebody walked up to the spider web with a fork, stuck it in and twisted it. It's going to make a knot and it's going to pull everything towards it. So when we are traumatized here in the chest, there's 2 somatic trauma imprint locations here in the chest and 2 inside the hips, between the pubic bone and the hip bone, right where the psoas muscle goes through, right? The muscle of the soul,
Mm-hmm.
right, goes through. We hold trauma in those 4 spots. In tapping, in EFT, they call them the sore spots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we hold trauma in those spots, and guess where they put the tubes in the kids to go to their heart? Right through the epicenter of an energy meridian that holds trauma.
Mm.
Yeah. So these spots hold trauma. And what I did for my son was in the middle of the night after the surgery, the surgeon came in and said, I'm the one who did the surgery, orthoscopic surgery, and I left a vacuum ball and I need to check it. And it was 2:30 in the morning. So I worked with him to breathe, and he was able to raise his arm up a little bit, and she got in there with a flashlight, and she says, there's no fluid in the ball, so I'm going to take it out. So she had to take the tegaderm off, cut the stitch, pull the tube out, restitch it, and put a new tegaderm on. And he was just, we didn't have time to rehearse. We didn't, it was like moment's notice, and he did great because he'd been through a lot by then and we had a way to just get to it like that. So he did great. But she said, a nurse is going to have to change that in 24 hours. So be ready, or they'll hold him down, right? Because they have to do it. They do it all the time. So what I did, this is how stir came to me, is that he was sitting on the bed with his arms clutching that spot. And I sat across from him in the chair below him. I let him sit up on the bed in position of power. And I said, I'm going to think about moving my right hand towards your spot. And I don't want you to move your arm. I just want you to think about moving your arm. And we did that over and over. So the brain doesn't know the difference between a story and a real event. So if you rehearse something and it doesn't have a negative outcome, it dissipates the charge every time you practice it and rehearse it and don't have a negative outcome. Kids that I teach to do shots and IVs, we count down 3, 2, 1, go, and I flick them with my finger instead of a needle, and they rehearse it over and over again. And sometimes they tell me the shot was easier than the flick of my finger when they finally were relaxed and took it. Okay. So what I did is I said, okay, now Makoy, I'm going to raise my hand a little, and I want you just to put a little air gap between your arm and your ribs. And we did that over and over. We only had 1 day to do this. So, and pretty soon he was able to put his arm out like this. And I said, now I'm going to stick my hand in the gap, but I'm not going to touch you. You had to trust me. I'm not going to touch you. And we did that over and over again with no bad outcome. Pretty soon he's going like this and I'm changing the tegaderm like nothing. And that's where I started researching that. And 2 years later, I've been doing this for 2 years. I found Peter Levine with emotional re-experiencing,
Mm.
and he had a case where a grown man had no color vision and he didn't know why. They checked him all out, optometrist and neurologist, everybody checked him. Peter Levine works with him and does emotional re-experiencing, finds out he witnessed his own dad's hanging when he was 3. And the
Wow.
autonomic consciousness said that's too much information. So he lost 3D depth and color. And the minute he re-experienced that as an adult, he could see again. He could see full, and there's documented cases. So what I tapped into was a download that humanity was already tapping into. I just didn't know it. So it's not just a gift from God for me. It's like humanity has a need and divinity brings the answer. I mean, David Hawkins in his book Power versus Force, and he has the scale of consciousness and all that. He's like the ultimate guide in consciousness and research and kinesiology, muscle testing, collective consciousness. He's all that. He actually says a human can't have a problem unless the solution already exists in the quantum. And that is amazingly reassuring when you realize that, like he says, a human can't ask a question unless the answer already exists in the quantum, in the
Awesome.
collective. So the information's already there before the human can have the experience. So the only obstacle, resistance between the problem and the solution is the human windings of anxiety and angst. So what I do is create that state of receivership in our sanctuary space. We bring down the human windings, like they teach in Ho'oponopono and all ancient cultures. You become that singularity, and the gap between the problem and the solution collapses, and you manifest the proper solution into your life. So this biohacking, coherence breathing, is the absolute recipe for creating that sanctuary space, the state of receivership, and also that state of release for the trauma in my stir. The somatic trauma imprint release, like my son's surgery, that is a sympathetic trigger. He's guarding that with everything in his body. So the trauma spots are the same thing. So if I can locate that spot and bring awareness to it and the understanding of why it's holding the trauma, and it's like talk doctors, all they do is reinforce yesterday's trauma with today's consciousness
Yeah.
by going over it. And I always say, we don't have to excavate the past to clear your future. Because, like we said, the only way you can do anything about anything ever is right now in the moment. It's not like think about it later or I shoulda, woulda, coulda. It's like right in the moment. So if you are aware of how trauma is stored and you have an understanding of how to release it and you reset your system, then you can make an adjustment and that trauma will be released because your body is biohacked into a state where it feels safe to release it. And I've literally had people hallucinate the trauma as it's released, just like a movie like ancient Chinese where they have bamboo at the end of the acupuncture needles and they light the bamboo and in the smoke is the hallucination of the trauma as it's
Mhm.
released. I mean, it's thousands of years old, but just in a different way. But see, that's what all these years of research has led me to, is that we're all built the same. Man, woman, child, color, none of that matter. Every mechanism that I'm talking about is the same for every single person. And it's automatic. Like the autonomic nervous system with fight or flight and rest and digest, sympathetic and parasympathetic, it's automatic. It grows your fingernails, it regulates your metabolism, your immune system, it does everything for you automatically, but yet we can biohack it. There's a Venn diagram between what it does automatically and what we have control of, like blinking our eyes. It does it for us unless we think about it. Okay. It breathes for us unless we think about it.
Mhm.
So if our autonomic nervous system is triggered and it's constricting our chest and our diaphragm and it's cutting off our heart from our throat chakra, because when you're traumatized or shamed, you can't speak your truth, right? You're not usually grounded and heart open, right? So that cuts off your gut and have digestive issues, right? And sexual issues from sexual trauma and not being grounded and open, right?
Mhm.
That's it all lines up. So the coherence breathing is the key to get to that state of receivership and the state of release for the somatic trauma imprint release trauma work I do as well.
Incredible. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for doing the work in the world.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for hearing
Yeah.
it and asking, being interested.
So interested. So interesting. All of the information. Do you have time to stick around for a few minutes and lead us through a breathing exercise?
Sure. Love to.
Awesome.
So you would like me to lead a breathing exercise? Is that what I understand?
I would love that.
Okay. Would you like me to focus on just the coherence breathing, or should we assume we're triggered and go from the reset to the controlled to the coherence? What do we
Your
have time
choice.
for?
What do you think our listeners would most benefit from?
Well, I'm going to assume that most of our listeners are in a really good space right now, having attended this and we can be triggered by hearing these stories about my son, but we can also, I mean, he's 16 years old, he plays jazz guitar. They said he'd never play guitar or piano because of all the radiation in his brain from his bone marrow transplant, and he's fluid jazz guitarist. He's just like breaks the mold.
Awesome.
So I'm going to assume everybody's in a good state of being, and we're just going to go to the coherence breathing. So, what I invite everybody to do is just get in their chair, get in, be present in the space. And this is an important word to take home is agency, okay? Ownership, purpose, agency. We want to embody, our energy body wants to be fully in our physical body. I call it hand in the glove. We want to own who we are, how we show up. So we want to be fully present. And anytime we are doing this breathing exercise, we are creating that bubble. We are creating that coherence toroidal field that grows and grows. Okay. HeartMath has wonderful photos and all kinds of videos about the toroidal field of their heart. So it's literally like an energy bubble that expands. Every time you breathe in the perfect image of your divine self. No encumbrances, no inhibitions, no physical ailment. That perfect, healthy image of yourself, because like I said, the brain doesn't know the difference between a story and a real event. If you use guided imagery, like creative visualization, like Shaki Gawain, one of my books up there, okay? If you use creative visualization on the inhale, you're an inspiration is the breath that fills the soul. As you inspire, when you take in an inspiration, it's that vision. Your heartbeat's going to speed up because when you breathe in, your heartbeat speeds up. And when you exhale, you release. Exhale, release anything that's not that image. Like if you're holding that image, but oh, my leg hurts, exhale right through the leg pain, right? You're breathing like Reiki cycle. Breathe in, clear, and breathe out. Okay. So this is what you do. You get into your comfortable space. You take full agency of who you are, where you are. You're doing this with intention of making a biophysical connection to your heart. You're going to listen to your heart for a minute. Just slow down. Now, what's important with the counting, a lot of people don't like to count because they think, oh, I've practiced pranayama, I've done all this other stuff. I don't like to count. Well, counting gives something for the left brain to do. Instead of thinking, oh, I got to find my keys and this isn't going well, if you give your left brain a little job of counting your heartbeats, you're bringing it to the table. You're giving it a job to do and including it. So then you'll be laterally integrated and coherent, right? So we reach up in this comfortable position and we find our pulse. I like to use my left hand on my right wrist, but it doesn't really matter. You can do whatever. A lot of times I'll put my hand on my heart and I'll do that courtesy reach around to get the pulse right here. Okay. And you can feel your heart in your chest, and you can feel it in your fingers and your pulse. Okay. Now, what we do is we take a gentle inhale and count 5 heartbeats. Raise up like that. That's good. And now gently exhale out of the mouth for 6 heartbeats. Nice and smooth. Only about 60% of your lung capacity, just the middle half. Breathe in gentle, not too much. 5 heartbeats. And then gently exhale for 6 heartbeats. 4, 5, 6. Now, when you breathe in, play with it. Think of that image and smile, and your heart will beat faster when you breathe in your nose. Okay? You'll feel it speed up. And then oral exhale and relax, like going down steps, slower and slower, especially on 4, 5, and 6. Now, with that nod, I'm sensing that you can feel your heartbeat speed up, and you can feel your heartbeat slow down. Okay? All right. So what you're doing, you're mentally paying attention, you're mindfully being present for your heart, and you're biophysically validating homeostasis, balance in your body. Okay. So you know for sure, you've just proven to yourself that if you stop for a minute and you breathe like that, you will go from being triggered to being balanced like flipping a switch. If you breathe like that, you will be coherent. The only way it won't work is if you don't do it. And every minute of the day, every heartbeat, every breath of the day you spend in coherence is a moment, a breath, a heartbeat that you're not triggered and reactive and in poor health. So this is the switch that turns everything back to the health factory in your entire body right here, when you can biophysically validate your heartbeat speeding up and slowing down. Simple as that.
Love that. Thank you, Jeff, for leading that. And we'll make sure that we have the link down in the show notes for people to be able to click on it and go to your YouTube channel to check that out.
Right on.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much for leading that exercise. And thank you so much for being on the show. This has been fantastic. Can you tell people how they can reach you if they'd like to get in touch?
Yeah, I keep my cell phone with me. On my Facebook account, I put my cell phone number. I have a number of care recipients that text me. We are in dialogue. My website is Mindful Presence. It's spelled like gifts. We bring the gift of mindfulness to pediatric patients, families, and care providers, and now the whole world. But mindfulpresence.org, and my email is jeff@mindfulpresence.org. And you can reach me on my cell of 360-941-7005, text or call, and I will get back to you.
Awesome. That's amazing, Jeff. Yeah. Thanks for sharing all that information.
You're welcome. And I wanted to add too that with the nonprofit, we never charge people in crisis, and we're always open to donations to fund my services, our services, for people who can't afford to do it on their own.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jeff,
Best
thank you
thing
so
ever.
much. Thank you so much for being on Raise the Vibe with Liz. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your awareness and your understanding, because this is now a reset and adjustment for both of us.
Thank you. I hope. Awesome. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, I'm Liz Peterson, and this is Raise the Vibe with Liz. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe, everybody. Have a good night. Bye now.